Well, it is nearly the end of the day. I have meatloaf in the oven for dinner, and so I'm literally on a timer. So I can't waffle on in this video for overly long because I actually have things I need to do and places I need to be. But I have a spare moment, and so I wanted to sit down and film this video because I have not filmed one of these videos in a really long time. This is part of the Homeschool Show and Tell collaboration that Abby from Rooted in Rest and Jessica from The Waldock Way have put together. I think this is like their second or third year doing it, but it's fantastic. It's a fantastic way of finding other homeschool moms on YouTube and just finding different perspectives that can be so helpful in your homeschool. So I'm joining in today, and we're going to chat about how to keep history fun. Before I jump into my thoughts on this, do go ahead and check out the playlist link down below. It's got all the other YouTubers who have joined in on this topic this month, and you can find them all there, and you can find Jessica and Abby, both very experienced, fantastic homeschool moms. Jessica makes a lot of fantastic curriculum that is worth checking out, and Abby is just like a wealth of information. I feel like she's like a big sister. She's amazing. But today we're going to chat specifically about the topic of history and how to keep it fun or to make it fun in your homeschool. I feel like history gets a bad rap. I know my experience with learning history in school for the most part was not positive. I didn't enjoy it. I found it really boring. Couldn't relate. A lot of things like that. It was just like dry facts, dates, people I didn't really understand and couldn't relate to very well. So there was that. And I was homeschooled for a good chunk of my education. It wasn't really until the last bit of my homeschooling where my mom picked up a really fantastic homeschool curriculum, which I will talk about, that I started to enjoy history. And it wasn't until I started sort of discovering history for myself that I really developed a love for the subject. Now it's probably my favorite subject to teach. If you ask my children, certainly my firstborn will tell you that history is his favorite subject. He's 8 years old. But all of them would say that it's fun because history is never boring in our home. It's always been fun to discover and learn together. And honestly, it has not been difficult to teach. It's been really fun to teach. And I think that's just due to the resources we've had available and also the method of teaching. And so that's what I'm going to talk to today. Is just like tips for how to teach history in a way that makes it come alive and can be relatable to your children. Because the reality is when they can relate to it, when they can see how it relates to their lives and can imagine themselves in other people's shoes, that's when it really, the magic happens, and they can remember things. And dates they aren't arbitrary anymore. They actually have significance. And you will also instill a love of learning in your child, and they'll be motivated to go and seek more information. So that is certainly what I have seen in my children. It's what I know to be true of myself. And so I think that it can be helpful to parents who are, homeschooling, and perhaps history is a pain point, or perhaps you're considering homeschooling and you're like, how on earth am I going to teach this subject? Because I hated it. And the reality is we all have those subjects. I'm sure there are the exceptions. I'm sure there are people out there who loved every subject in school. I was not one of those people. And there were even subjects that I liked. There's obviously parts of it that are not fun. But history should be fun. History is interesting and fascinating. And I think it broadens our worldview. It helps us to appreciate what we have more. And just gives us, broadens our horizons because we can just see outside of ourselves a little bit more. So let me chat about what we do in our home and what I've seen to work really well. First of all, I would say that historical fiction plays a massive role in our homeschool and our study of history. It's something that I read a lot of when I was a teenager and even in my, middle school years, I would say, and upwards. I read so much and I learned so much history through reading historical fiction, specifically the books like My Diary or My Story, where it was a fictional character, but it was set in a real time. Like whether it be World War II or like the sinking of the Titanic or something like that. They would create a fictional character who lived in that time, but it was set in a historically accurate time and the events were historically accurate. And I learned so much through those. Now, if I'm in op shops or thrift stores, I will look for those books. I've got quite a few of them already. I pick them up all the time because that is what I want my kids to be able to reach for on our bookshelves and read about, because not only is it interesting and entertaining, it's also incredibly informative. And that is how I really discovered my love of history. I still read a lot of historical fiction as an adult. In fact, that is my preferred genre of books. If I'm going to pick one, it would definitely be historical fiction. There's just something so fascinating about learning about another time and place and imagining what it would be like to be that person. It's just really interesting to me. So historical fiction plays a massive part in our homeschool. And then we also do, if we've studied a specific time period, I will try and find either places to visit that tie into that, YouTube videos that we can watch that will show those places in real life, or movies, even if they're fiction. If it plays into that time period, then it can be really helpful to help my kids connect the dots and help it to come alive to them. So when things are relatable, they're so much easier to remember, and they really do make more of an impact. So that is how we keep things fun. But I want to talk about specific resources that we have personally used that I've loved. First is actually the history curriculum that my mom used when I was a child, and that is Story of the World. And I think it speaks a lot about the curriculum because it's been used for generations now. It's not just like a one-off thing. And it is just beautifully written. You can get it from Well Trained Mind. I think you can get it on Amazon and stuff like that as well. But Story of the World is beautiful. It's literature-based. There's lots of add-ons. You can make it as simple or as complex as you want it to be. I know that Abby from Rooted in Rest uses Story of the World, has done for years, and has lots of really helpful information on it if you go check out her channel. I ended up getting the audio version of the book, which is read by Jim Weiss, and he is a fantastic storyteller. I've actually seen him in person. My parents took us up to one of his shows, I guess you could call it, when I was a teenager, and we listened to him tell stories, and it was just fantastic. So if you want to take something off your plate, if you want one less book to read, then you can get the audio version, and it's really well done. The chapters are short, but they're engaging, and I felt like even though it's not a Charlotte Mason curriculum, you can totally adapt it to be used in a Charlotte Mason way, in the sense that because the chapters are short, they're like perfect for narration, like perfect stopping points to like ask your kids questions or get them to narrate to you. So that's something to keep in mind. There are activities, hands-on components. I remember making like catapults, I think, when we were kids. And I mean, this is a long time ago. I was probably 12 when I remember that. And I remember studying Egypt, and like I remember that kind of stuff. So I feel like that's pretty good. It made an impact, and I remember it being fun. I remember sitting there and being like, read the next chapter. So that is a resource we have used and really enjoyed. But what we have used this year has been like incredible, and I've loved it so much. And that is Sunlight. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that. I announced that at the beginning of the year. We've used Sunlight for our history, Bible, literature. This year we've been studying U.S. history, and I just love it. It is taught strictly from literature. You get a ton of books when you order it, which is reflected in the cost. It is a very pricey curriculum, although you can pick them up secondhand because most of it is non-consumable. You can pick it up secondhand, which is really great. But I was just going to show you some of the books that we have read recently. This is just, honestly, just a few. We've read so many. This is our most recent one that we finished. This is one of the Magic Treehouse books, and this was set during the Civil War. And my son in particular really loved this. He's fascinated with the wars and the military in general, honestly, at the moment. And so this was a really good fit for him. It was short chapters, kept my kids engaged, was really interesting. Another one that we just finished off was this one, Your Life as a Settler in Colonial America. My kids really enjoyed this, all of them did, because it literally takes you through like what your life would be like as a child living back then. And there was a lot of conversation about how it differs from our lives now and that kind of thing. And so it just made it come alive. And something I find really fascinating is a lot of the time after we have finished our history studies, I will hear my kids playing outside and they are literally playing what we read about. Whether they're setting up a cabin as, you know, a kid who lives back then, or I remember my son coming to me, we were like finishing up church, and I was like, what are you guys playing? And he was talking about, I can't remember, I think it was like the British and the Americans and the Revolutionary War, and it was kind of like a cops and robbers game. But they had set it up that way. It was like the nerdiest homeschool thing ever, and it was just amazing, and I loved it. And so I very often see what we've learned in history being played out through their play, and I just think that's fantastic. They're solidifying it. They're able to relate to it. And I mean, I think we can call it fun if they're playing like a game with it, right? So I think that's a win. And then the last one I was just going to show, I mean, I've got so many more here, and this is definitely dirty. I think there's like chocolate on it. This is the Heroes and Happening book. I think it's book 1, volume 1. There's 2 volumes. We're about to move on to the second one. But this one in particular has lots of stories about famous American, like, historical figures. I was trying to get my words around. It's nearing the end of the day, guys. But this one's been really great as well. I've learned a lot from this. And this isn't historical fiction. This is nonfiction. But it's still been engaging and fun. And I think that is the other thing I would just speak to is sometimes it's not that the information is boring, it's the way in which it is presented. And so just be creative in the way that you are teaching your children history. Think outside of the box. Think about how you would like to be taught that information, how you would retain it best. And it really does go a long way. Another great idea is to do a presentation, whether it's, you know, a couple times a year or just once at the end of the year, where they can choose a historical figure that you've been studying that year, and then they can like make a costume. They could bake or cook something from that time period, do like a show and tell, basically. Whether it could be to grandparents, you know, family, friends, whatever. It could be in a homeschool co-op situation. But that can be really, really helpful. And just make it come alive for them. I know when I was a child, we studied the Battle of Blood River, which is a very famous battle that took place in South Africa, which is where I'm from. And then we live in New Zealand, but we went back there when I was a child and we visited the site. And that was just after we had done like the research project on it and everything. And I've never forgotten it. It's been amazing. And so whenever you can like tie in field trips or just multiple sensory learning experiences really does help bring it alive, make it relatable, and make it impactful. And ultimately, for me personally, reading historical fiction just pushed me into wanting to learn more. I would go to the library and I'd get books out on things and I would watch stuff, and I was just like craving learning more. And that's what I want my kids to have. I know for me it was like historical fashion. I loved that, and I learned so much about it, and used to sit there and draw all the time these different dresses for different time periods. It was just so fascinating to me. I loved things like Little Women, Little House on the Prairie. The Tudor era I found so incredibly fascinating. So just see how you can get it to relate to your child and make it come alive for them, because I can guarantee you that'll make it fun for them. You may not be able to sit there and quiz them on this and that, but I bet you they will be able to chat to you about what they're interested in history, and you'll be surprised at how much they can retain from a super young age. So I hope this is helpful. Go ahead and check out the playlist with all the other videos. My kids are getting louder and louder. I can hear them. They're like starting to come up the stairs now. I'm gonna have to wrap up this video and go finish cooking dinner. But I hope that you found it helpful and enjoyable. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. But I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
What if the world had more of your smile? What if the wind could spread your love? What if your sweetness could reach everyone? There'd be no